All right, everybody, welcome to another deep dive. And today we're tackling something that I think is going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
It's punishment.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I know.
Big word.
It's a big word and it comes with a lot of baggage. But
Mhm.
in the world of behavior modification, it has a very specific meaning. And we're going to try to unpack that today.
Yeah, it's really interesting how most people think of punishment as, something negative,
Right.
like a consequence meant to make someone suffer or, pay for their wrongdoing. But it's actually, in behavior modification, way more nuanced than that.
Way more nuanced. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the textbook that we're looking at today really dives into that. And
It's pretty fascinating.
it is fascinating. It's
Ab-
chapter 6 of a behavior modification textbook.
Yeah, and they get right into
To
it.
get right into it. So
Yeah.
what's the first thing that we should know?
Well, the big thing is that in behavior modification, punishment is really just a process that decreases a specific behavior.
Oh.
So it's less about retribution and more about weakening the chances of that behavior happening again.
Okay, so
It's about understanding the mechanics of behavior change.
got it.
And punishment in this context is simply one of those mechanics.
One of the tools.
Exactly.
Okay, so the textbook goes on to define it as having three key parts.
Yeah.
First, you've got the behavior itself, right?
Right.
That's the thing that we're looking at.
Yeah.
Then there's a consequence
Yes.
that immediately follows that behavior.
Mhm.
And then as a result of that consequence, the behavior becomes less likely to happen again.
Yeah, the consequence.
So cause and effect.
Yeah. It changes the likelihood that that behavior is going to happen in the future.
So it's not about punishing the
And
person.
it's not about
It's about targeting a specific
fracture.
action you want to see less of.
Yes.
So like if you speed
Right.
and you get a speeding ticket,
Yeah.
it's
Not
not
a judgment on your character.
a judgment on your character. It's meant to make you less likely to speed in the future.
Right. It's all about decreasing that specific behavior.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a really good foundation. And then
Yeah. And then it gets interesting.
it gets interesting because
Because then they're like, oh, there's these different types of punishment.
yeah, positive punishment and negative punishment.
Yeah.
Now this is where,
I think this is where most people get tripped up.
yeah, I was going to say, this is where I think people get tripped up because we think positive good,
Exactly.
negative bad.
Right. And that's not
But in behavior modification, that's not it at all.
at all. No, a behavior modification positive just means we're adding something. And negatives means we're taking something away.
Okay, so positive punishment
Yeah.
is adding something after a behavior
Yeah.
to make it less likely.
Yes. Adding something unpleasant
Unpleasant, yeah.
or aversive
Okay,
to make that behavior less likely to occur.
and negative punishment is taking away something.
That's desirable.
Desirable.
Or pleasant to make that behavior less likely.
Okay, so give me an example for each of those.
Sure. So let's say a child touches a hot stove.
Okay.
They touch the stove and then, ouch, they get burned, right? That pain is added after the behavior of touching the stove, making it less likely that they'll touch the stove again in the future.
Right, so that's adding something
Adding something aversive. Yeah.
unpleasant.
Exactly.
Okay, and for negative punishment,
Yeah.
teenager stays out past curfew,
Oh, yeah.
parents take away the phone.
The phone is gone.
The phone is gone, privileges are gone.
Right.
They're less likely to stay out past curfew again.
It's all about those consequences and how they shape future choices.
Oh, okay, that's a really good breakdown.
Yeah, it can be kind of tricky, but once you wrap your head around it, it's pretty straightforward.
So we've got positive and negative punishment.
Yeah.
We kind of understand that, but then the textbook throws another
Another curveball.
curveball our way.
Yeah.
Unconditioned versus conditioned punishers.
Oh, this is getting juicy.
It's getting good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you know how some things we just know are bad?
Right.
Like we don't have to learn that they're bad?
Right.
Things like pain or extreme temperatures, our bodies are just wired to avoid them.
Right. We're not going
We
to
don't have to learn.
jump
Yeah.
into a fire
Exactly.
because we know that's bad.
We know it's hot. Yeah. Instinctively.
Those are unconditioned punishers.
Okay.
But then there are things that become punishing over time through association and learning.
Okay.
And those are conditioned punishers.
So like, how does that work?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
You can pair something neutral with an already punishing stimulus and make that neutral thing effective at decreasing behavior.
Oh, so like the word no,
Yes, the word no means nothing to a baby.
right? But if you pair it consistently with unpleasant experiences,
Then it becomes
it becomes a punisher in and of itself.
powerful.
Very powerful.
Okay, so
Even without any physical discomfort, it's learned. Or think about a disappointed look from a parent.
right.
That only works as a punisher if it's been associated with the loss of something good.
Like privileges.
like privileges or praise.
Okay.
So it's fascinating how these conditioned punishers become so ingrained in our social interaction.
That's a whole nother layer.
A whole nother layer.
To communication.
Absolutely.
But the textbook is also careful to point out
Yeah.
that even though punishment can be a powerful tool, it's not always the answer. And they go into a bunch of potential downsides
Yeah.
to using punishment and ethical concerns
Yeah. They have a whole section about that.
that we should definitely unpack.
This is fascinating stuff.
It is.
That, we approach baking a cake with more precision than we sometimes approach behavior modification.
It's true.
It's like you wouldn't just throw ingredients together and hope for the best.
Right.
You need the right ingredients in the right amounts.
Absolutely.
And punishment's the same way. It's not just about delivering a consequence.
Okay.
There are certain elements that need to be in place for it to be truly effective.
Okay, so what are these like ingredients for successful punishment?
Well, one of the most important factors is immediacy.
Okay.
The textbook really emphasizes that the faster the consequence happens after the behavior, the stronger the connection will be.
Makes sense.
Like if you think about burning your hand on a stove,
Right.
that immediate pain is what teaches you to be extra careful next time.
Yeah, a delayed consequence wouldn't have the same impact.
Exactly.
Like, oh yeah, yesterday I touched the stove and now it hurts.
Right. It just wouldn't be as effective.
Yeah, so immediacy is key.
Immediacy is key.
What else?
So then we have contingency.
Okay, continue.
Which basically means that the punishment needs to occur every single time the behavior happens.
Oh, so consistency is key.
Consistency is absolutely crucial.
Got it.
Because if it's only applied sometimes, the behavior is much less likely to decrease.
Like with the speeding ticket example, if you only got a ticket once in a blue moon.
Right? You'd be like, I'll take my chances.
Yeah, I'll risk it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the textbook uses this classic example of a rat pressing a lever for food.
Okay, yeah.
And if the rat gets a shock every single time it presses the lever, it will quickly learn to stop pressing the lever.
Right.
But if the shock only happens occasionally, the rat might just keep pressing, hoping for that food reward.
Because sometimes it works out.
Exactly. This is why having clear rules and expectations is so important when using punishment.
Right.
Everyone involved needs to be on the same page about which behaviors will result in punishment and what the consequences will be.
So you're not getting mixed messages.
Yeah. Exactly. You need to be consistent.
Okay, so we've got immediacy, we've got consistency.
Yes.
What else am I missing for my punishment cake?
Well, there's one more vital ingredient to consider,
Okay.
and that's motivation.
Motivation.
What's punishing for one person might not be for another.
Oh, interesting.
Like some people can handle spicy food like it's nothing.
Right. I am not one of those people.
And others can barely handle a sprinkle of pepper.
Yeah, a little bit of black pepper, and I'm like, too much.
Exactly.
So you're saying the same principle applies to punishment?
Absolutely. It all comes down to individual differences
Okay.
and how we each perceive and respond to different stimuli.
Okay.
What motivates one person to change their behavior might have little to no effect on someone else.
So punishment is not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Not at all.
Got it.
It really requires careful observation
Okay.
and a deep understanding of the individual.
And that's where the expertise of someone who's certified comes in. You need to be able to really understand the person you're working with.
You need to be able to assess the individual,
Yeah.
understand their motivations, and tailor the approach accordingly.
Because what might be aversive to one person,
Might be totally neutral to another.
or even enjoyable?
They're even enjoyable. That's right.
So it's really about finding the right consequence that fits
The individual.
the individual.
Yeah.
Okay, this is really interesting.
Yeah, it's getting pretty deep, isn't it?
It's a deep dive.
It is a deep dive.
And we're getting into the nuances now.
Absolutely.
We started with a simple definition,
Right.
but now we're seeing that there's all these factors to consider
Yeah, we're getting into the nitty-gritty.
to really use punishment effectively
And ethically.
and ethically.
Right, because we can't forget about those potential downsides we talked about earlier.
Right, there's a whole other side to this
There is.
that we need to explore.
Yeah, stay tuned
Oh, okay.
as we delve deeper into those potential pitfalls.
And the textbook actually highlights a whole bunch of potential downsides to using punishment.
Yeah, like it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
No, it's not a magic wand.
Definitely not.
And I think that's really important for people to understand.
Absolutely, especially for anyone who's thinking of trying this without really understanding the impact it can have.
Yeah, it's not something to just jump into.
We gotta be careful.
So what are some of these potential pitfalls that the textbook talks about?
Well, one of the first things they bring up is this idea of emotional backlash.
Okay, emotional backlash.
Yeah, like imagine a child who's being punished harshly.
Okay.
They might stop the unwanted behavior,
Right.
but they might also become angry, resentful, or even more defiant.
They might start acting out in other ways.
Exactly. It can create more problems than it solves.
So instead of
Right.
guiding them toward positive change,
Yeah.
you're kind of pushing them away.
You're pushing them away and creating this negative emotional response.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And this ties into another problem that the textbook talks about,
Okay.
which is people becoming what they call escape artists.
Escape artists.
Yeah, when faced with punishment, humans are incredibly good at finding ways to avoid it.
Oh, yeah, we're creative.
We're very creative.
Like if there's a will, there's a way.
Exactly, and not always in a good way.
Right.
Like the textbook gives some examples.
Right.
People might start lying to avoid getting in trouble, or they might withdraw from situations where they think they'll be punished. So they're not
But
actually
they're learning from the punishment. They're
right?
just learning to avoid it.
Right, they're just avoiding the consequence.
Exactly.
But the behavior's still there.
The behavior might still be there. Okay, so that kind of defeats the whole purpose.
It does. It really undermines the whole point of using punishment in the first place.
Okay. Yeah.
And then there's this thing called the overuse temptation.
Overuse temptation.
Yeah, punishing someone can actually be reinforcing for the person doing the punishing.
Oh, how so?
Well, especially if it stops the unwanted behavior right away.
Okay.
It can give you this sense of control, like, oh, I did this and it worked.
Right.
But it can lead to a cycle where punishment becomes the go-to response.
Even when there might be other approaches.
Even when other approaches might be more effective or more appropriate.
It's like a shortcut
It is a shortcut.
that ends up taking you down the wrong road.
Exactly. You're so focused on stopping the behavior in the moment
Right.
that you miss the bigger picture.
Yeah, you're not actually helping the person learn and grow.
Right. You're not teaching them alternative ways to behave.
You're just trying to stop the behavior.
You're just putting out fires.
Yeah. And that's not really what we want to do in the long run. We want to teach people.
We want to help people develop positive behaviors.
Right.
And that often involves more than just punishment.
Okay. This is really eye-opening.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It is. We've really gone through a lot today.
We have.
We started with this simple definition of punishment.
Right.
We talked about different types.
Positive and negative.
Unconditioned and conditioned.
Yeah.
And we've even gotten into the potential downsides.
And the ethical considerations. It's been quite a journey.
It has. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that punishment is a powerful tool.
It is.
But it's a tool that needs to be used responsibly.
Absolutely. With great power comes great responsibility.
And ethically.
You got it.
And I think this deep dive has really given us a lot to think about.
I think so too.
In terms of how we approach behavior change.
And how we use these techniques.
In our own lives.
And in our work.
So thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into punishment.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been really enlightening.
I'm glad you found it helpful.
And I hope everyone listening got as much out of it as I did.
Me too.
So until next time, keep thinking, keep learning, and keep exploring.